Good afternoon. My name is Nathan, and before we begin, I want to acknowledge that choosing to watch this conversation about suicide prevention takes courage. These topics are not easy, and I appreciate you holding the space for them today. What you're about to watch is not a clinical presentation or a polished success story, it's my lived experience. This video was recorded by Artura Learning and is now being used as part of suicide prevention training across the aged care and disability sectors. I want to be very clear from the outset, this story is raw. It speaks openly about mental health, trauma, distress, and suicide. If at any point this feels overwhelming, please know it's okay to pause, step away, or reach out to someone you trust. Looking after yourself always comes first. To give you some context about who I am and where this story comes from, my life didn't begin with stability. I grew up with childhood trauma, experience that shaped how I saw myself, how I coped, and how I learned to survive long before I learned how to feel safe. Like many people, I learned early to push things down, to keep going, and to appear strong on the outside. I spent 20 years serving in the Royal Australian Navy, where strength, resilience, and mission focus are not optional. They're expected. During this time, I was deployed on operations connected to the Middle East, including time around Iraq, and later on Christmas Island as part of border protection operations. These environments teach you discipline, teamwork, and how to operate under pressure, but they don't always teach you how to process what you carry home. And over time, layers of trauma, early life trauma combined with service-related experiences can quietly accumulate. Like many people in caring, protective, or high responsibility roles, I became very good at supporting others while slowly disconnecting from my own needs. From the outside, things look functional. On the inside, they weren't. I'm sharing this story for one reason only, because if it helps even one person recognize warning signs earlier, feel less alone in their struggle, or realize that asking for help is not weakness, then it's worth it. This story isn't about blame and it isn't about dramatic moments. It's about how distress can build quietly, how warning signs are often missed, not through neglect, but through misunderstanding, and how connection can be life-saving when it arrives at the right time. As you watch this video, I invite you to listen with compassion, not just for me, but for the people you support, work alongside, care for, and perhaps even yourself. Thank you for being here and for the work you do every day in suicide prevention, care, and human connection. I'll now share the video before sharing a conclusion. It's been a developing situation since around 2011. I'd say around 2015 was the real start of the intrusive thoughts. I was going through a phase there of a lot of nightmares, waking up several times thinking I was in traumatic situations, and it just got so overwhelming within that year that that's when I began to have suicidal ideations, and that same year had two suicide attempts that obviously, thankfully, didn't come to fruition. But yeah, it was probably the toughest year that I've been through so far. It wasn't what was happening in the here and now in 2015. It was a culmination of so many things that had happened from child through to 2015 when it started to happen for me. I've lived through significant childhood trauma, parents splitting up, abusive mum at times, being booted out of home at 16, and then that having a flow-on effect to my behaviour and how I saw the world. I really struggled in the early stages of my military career, which I started in the year 2000. And as a result of some of the places that I went to and some of the things that I saw in my operational deployments, that also contributed to how I became to get to 2015 and have those really difficult moments in my life. We all have things happening in our life, but when you've had so many traumatic experiences, it kind of felt for me like I was already sitting on the edge of the cliff, ready to fall off. And I definitely thought that suicide was the only way out for me. I think one thing to remember is at the time, I it just felt like everything was happening so fast around me. I didn't know any of the signs or symptoms. But now that I've had time to reflect and I've gone through an academic journey as well and professional journey, it's clear at the time that I was dealing with severe depression and when I talk about depression, I talk about the fact that I couldn't get out of bed most mornings. It was a real struggle to get out of bed and just face the day. I felt, and it's kind of like before I play a game of football, I get real big butterflies in my stomach. I felt that anxiety the minute my eyes opened every morning. I just felt like that nervous energy, like what's going to happen today? Can I control what I'm going to see and hear today? Um, and most of all, I was very irritable with everyone and everything. It was just like I could go from 0 to 100 in a second and just completely lose control. And I knew that wasn't normal at the time, but I just felt like I couldn't control it back then. Now, from looking from the outside back in, I can clearly see where the warning signs are, and I clearly know how to support them now through strategies. When you're in the deep trenches of poor mental health, it can be very challenging to know where to reach out for help. So I think back then I wish I had some more people around me that could point me in the right direction of how to get that support so I didn't get into such a bad state. It was after the suicide attempts that I then reached out for help. My wife is very supportive. She also works in the mental health field as well. I have always felt very open to talk to her about everything. I didn't tell her immediately, but a short time after I told her, when I sort of got brave enough to speak about it, when I told her, she didn't judge or anything. She just said, look, you need some support here. Look, I'm here, but you need professional support. I'll help you get to that point and organise it. The more positive relationships you can have in your life, the better you're going to be. I think if I was going to pinpoint anything, consistency in my therapy journey was key to me sort of getting through that challenging time without having the regular therapy and someone to talk to get practical strategies on dealing with, the really severe mental health that I was dealing with. There's no way that I would be in the position I am today with the things that I have if I hadn't had that consistency of therapy support. I've now realized that I can turn that trauma into helping other people, turning that trauma into opportunities to speak about it, to create awareness around mental health. That's what's really helping me get through day to day is using that lived experience and turning it into a way of supporting as many people as possible. It makes me feel good about myself. It makes me feel like I'm helping people, and it makes those challenging things that come at me day to day now not as difficult to deal with because of all the work I'm doing to help people in the community. For a carer or a person listening to someone's mental health journey, it's not about trying to save their life. It's not about trying to give them all the answers. It's about being empathetic and listening and opening yourself up to whatever support that the other person may need. But also make them feel that mental health is a natural part of life and that everyone deals with mental health so they feel not alone. And then if you have some supports that you can give them over straight away, show them where the supports are, that there's plenty of them, and give them the warm and fuzzy that those supports can help change their life. Thank you for staying with that. I want to acknowledge that what you've just watched may have stirred up a lot. Thoughts, emotions, memories, or even physical reactions. That's completely normal. Stories like this don't just land in our heads, they land in our bodies and in our hearts. With this story shows us that suicide rarely comes out of nowhere. It's often the result of accumulated pain, unspoken, misunderstood, or carried alone for far too long. Childhood trauma, high stress roles, repeated exposure to responsibility, loss or threat, and the belief that we must just keep going can all quietly compound over time. One of the most dangerous myths around suicide is that it only affects a certain type of person. The reality is very different. People who are capable, strong, caring, outwardly functional can still be struggling deeply. Many people at risk are the ones others rely on the most. Suicide prevention is not about having the perfect words or fixing someone's pain. It's about connection. It's about noticing changes, listening without judgment, taking distress seriously, and staying present when someone feels overwhelmed by their own thoughts. It's also about misunderstanding that asking for help is not a failure of resilience, it's an act of courage, and offering help doesn't require expertise, it requires humanity. For those of you working in aged care, disability, health, or support roles, you sit in a powerful position. Often, you may be the consistent present in someone's life. The way you listen, the questions you ask, and the safety you create can generally save lives. I also want to say this clearly. If any part of this story resonated with you personally, if you recognize yourself, your thoughts, or your feelings, you are not alone. Support is available, and help is not a burden to others. You deserve care just as much as anyone you support. Suicide prevention doesn't always look dramatic. Often it looks like checking in. It looks like asking, are you really okay? And being willing to hear the answer. It looks like staying connected, even when things feel uncomfortable. If this session does nothing more than encourage one person to reach out, one person to listen more closely, or one person to realize they don't have to carry everything alone, then it has done its job. Thank you for giving this story your attention, your respect, and your compassion. Thank you for the work you do every day to support others, often quietly and without recognition. And finally, if you or someone you know needs immediate support, please reach out to your local crisis services or trusted supports. Help is always available, and lives are worth protecting, including your own.